Okay, what's up, everybody? As people drop in, we will say hello. But first, let me introduce this. I don't even know how to introduce this chat because this is such a big topic. And let me say first and foremost, this is sort of version 2 of a buddy read discussion that was originally planned with some others that, for various reasons, wound up not vibing with the story perfectly, right? Totally fair. That's going to be part of people's experience sometimes. And so I do want to shout out uh, Philip and Jimmy Nuts, who both had read at least some portion of the story and tried to fight through, but it just wasn't quite the right fit for them at least at that time, which is totally fine. But I do want to at least show them a little bit of love, and also to Brian from Belltube, who did finish the book, but from some scheduling stuff wasn't able to join the discussion here live with us. So shout out to the homies. But we three survived, and we're here to chat about The Urth of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. And this is it's a weird, crazy, interesting book. And so I think there's going to be a lot that we can talk about, and we're definitely not going to be able to talk about every single thing. So one of the other things that I want to kind of point people to is Moyd from Media Death Cult has some really, really great videos, and he's got, is it called The Ultimate Guide to the Book of the New Sun?
Yeah.
It is quite possibly the best YouTube video I've ever watched.
It's so good.
It's
Yeah.
so good. And so I'd like to direct some people over there as well. And Sam has a bunch of New Sun videos on his channel too. So more content available for those who are interested, but we're going to do our best. And I think the first thing I'd like to start with is some spoiler-free stuff, of course, where I think maybe just general enjoyment. What did you think of your reading experience with this book? So we will start. I'll start with Joanna because you and I kind of buddy read this very closely along with the other books in the series. So let's start with you. What did you think, generally speaking, about Urth of the New Sun?
Let me put my wolf cap on here to think about
here we
it.
go. Here we go.
Let me think about that. What did I think of Book of the New Sun or Urth of the New Sun, the whole thing? Or
Actually, you know what? Let's maybe do both, like Urth as itself, and then maybe zoom out a little bit as like a whole series kind of thing.
okay, yeah. It's going to be hard to keep my thoughts totally spoiler free. I'm going to do my best. With Urth of the New Sun, I think the three of us are in agreement. Like this does feel essential. That it felt essential to me for the series. Uh, I I did not feel totally complete in my experience for some reason when I finished the Citadel of the Autarch, and I think some of that is understandable given how much Wolf intends us to reread the series to understand it and to get different layers of it. But I still felt like there was more to be had, more story to be had, and so I know that the saying goes that Earth of the New Sun clarifies much of what goes on in Book of the New Sun. And actually, I agree with that. I feel like there were some things that made more sense as to why they were there in Book of the New Sun when you get to Earth of the New Sun. But in addition to that, it continues the story. And so I feel like it finished the story. It felt like it completed the story for me in a fairly satisfying way. I don't need endings to be 100% tied down. I don't need every plot thread tied down. I don't even need to understand everything to feel complete in an ending of a series or a story. But for whatever reason, the end of Earth of the New Sun, I did find very satisfactory. There are some things in the story itself that were a little uncomfortable for me, as far as like male gaze stuff, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. And some of that I will say has to do with expectation. I just want to say that right away. This is more my expectation based on what I'd heard other people tell me about this series and where I think it actually went. But yeah, overall, I think it is a brilliant work of science fiction fantasy, however you want to categorize that. It certainly draws its influences from Jack Vance, from The Dying Earth. I think that's pretty clear. And I think that it it does things that I, at the same time, have never seen before in the genre. Not to say that there aren't things like it. I just think it does what it does very, very well. And as far as being a very cryptic piece of literature, it succeeds on that front, in my opinion. And I had a wonderful time, by the way, buddy, reading this with you, Jake. We had a wonderful discussion with Sam here and a bigger group, as Jake said. And I enjoyed that discussion quite a bit for book one. And I was very sad that our bigger group didn't continue. But at the same time, it's been so much fun to continue the series alongside Jake, and then now to get to discuss this with Sam, who I know has expert knowledge on the series. Putting you on the spot.
Not close, but I appreciate it.
Well, more than us at least. More than us at least. That's awesome. I love that. Sam, also shout out to Gene Wolfe on your T-shirt there.
Yes,
And
that's right.
It's fitting. So, what did you think, man? What are your thoughts here, spoiler free?
Yeah. There's a lot of places that I could go with this. I guess I'll say this. The Urth of the New Sun is one of my favorite novels, period. But if I had to break up Book of the New Sun and not take it as one thing in its totality and say, oh, that's my favorite sci-fi novel, Urth of the New Sun on its own would probably be my favorite science fiction novel. So this is a book that is means a lot to me. I really love, and there's something funny that I've noticed about a lot of my favorite books. This is not the case with all of them, but many of my favorite books, often I bounce off of the first time that I read them. So one of the examples that I could point to, other than this, would be like C.S. Lewis, besides writing Narnia, wrote this weird science fiction-esque space trilogy that the last book of is called That Hideous Strength. And that is probably like my third or fourth favorite novel of all time. And the first time I read it, just hated it. I was like, what is this? I was like 12, so didn't know anything. I was like, what is this? I don't get this at all. And it took me reading it like a couple of times as I was growing up through my teen years before I was finally like, oh, this is amazing. This is incredible. And now it's one of my favorite books of all time. And I sort of had that experience with Urth of the New Sun when I read it the first time, where I'd gotten through Book of the New Sun. It took me like halfway through those four before I was like, do I even like this? Like, what the hell am I reading? And then when I got to Urth of the New Sun, as many people will experience, I'm like, we're on a spaceship, except it's like an 1800 sailing ship. Like, what is this? And then we're chasing after like this little goblin rat down in the tunnels, except it's not, and now it's an angel. What? And I finished it, but I was like, this was not it. Like the main four, that I enjoyed a lot, but this was not. And then I reread it actually later that same year. This was, I think, 2 years ago. And when I reread it, and it's not like, oh, I had to read it twice to get it. It's because I'm a dense dummy. And when I went through it a second time, knowing more of what to expect, being able to kind of take it bit by bit, I was like, oh, this is the best part of the series in my mind. And there's a question. Well, okay, so that's my experience on this reread. Loved it just as much. I think there's some helpful notes that we could talk about later, so I'll save them for now. But about how this book came about, how Wolfe originally intended Book of the New Sun, and kind of why that changed, and why Urth of the New Sun had to be written after that, because of how Book of the New Sun got changed because of publishing and stuff. But as far as my experience goes, yeah, one of my favorite sci-fi novels. Some of my favorite passages of Wolfe are in this book. And yeah, like you guys said, a lot of people will bounce off this one, even though they've gotten through the main four. And so while there's a lot of booktube content about the main four, there is a sad lack of stuff on Urth. So I'm glad to help fill in that gap.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Very nice. I don't know that I have too much to add to what the both of you said. I'm very much in agreement with you guys. I think that this was, I need to really sit down and think about how I would rank the book. I struggle to not just take the cop out of saying it's just one long book. But like, I really had a great time with Urth. I think especially because of like the back half of it and what it's, some of the reveals and some of the things that click into place and that kind of stuff. But man, this was so much. It's just as weird and trippy as the other ones, maybe more so in some sense. But it was just so much fun, and to finally have some of those things click into place a little bit more was really satisfying. And it wasn't. I think my perception, as somebody who didn't know a whole lot about like how this book came about, which after I finish these next couple sentences, Sam, that might actually be helpful there for you to kind of talk through that a little bit so we have that backdrop. But I came into it thinking this is going to be a much more overt, hey, this is what that meant back in book 2 or whatever. And it's just not. Like, it's there, but it's much more subtle than I was expecting. And if you're not paying attention, you will miss it, right? Like, it's much more clear here than it was in the earlier books, but nonetheless, it's still Gene Wolfe, right? So that made it, I think, even more satisfying to me. I think it would have been unsatisfying if it was just too easy with this one, right? To connect the dots. So that was my general experience. It was just a lot of fun, and it was super, super satisfying. And we'll get to this later. One of the hallmarks of this series, and is a struggle for a lot of people, is you're not super emotionally connected to the narrator. In fact, I would say most people are not at all emotionally connected to the narrator, and myself included. I'm reading the books for a different reason. But there's a moment towards the end that I felt such an intense emotional connection with Severian that it just like flipped that whole aspect of the reading experience for me and made me really appreciate what was happening. So I'll get back to that later because it happens towards the very end of the book. But anyway, that out of the way, there's a lot that happens, and we do need to get into some stuff because there's just so much to talk about. But I think to lead us in maybe to getting into some spoiler stuff. But first, Sam, do you want to talk through what you mentioned about like why this book came about, what's going on with it? Kind of give us that backdrop.
Sure. Okay, so the short version is, and true Wolf expert like Mark Aramini or even Longson Malrubius, who hangs out in the booktube area, they can correct me if I get some of this wrong. But my understanding is that Book of the New Sun, Wolf obviously writes it all in one go, those first 4 books. And originally, his plan is for it to be a trilogy, for it to be 3 books. And what is Sword of the Lictor and then Citadel of the Autarch is originally just supposed to be 1. But the book is too large, and so his publisher asks him to split it into 2 parts, which like seems to be a curse in publishing between like Ken Liu and Steven Erikson and Rockio and like all of these people having their last books split into 2. So he splits it, and Sword of the Lictor is fine, but Citadel of the Autarch isn't long enough. And so when you read it, there's a clear portion at the beginning of Citadel of the Autarch where it's like, oh, this is what was added, which is the storytelling contest. So there's about 4 or 5 chapters that help provide backstory and world building and all of these things, thematic stuff. And if you like the stories within stories of Book of the New Sun, then it's great that this was added. But my understanding is originally that wasn't part of it. And what this does is, for Book of the New Sun, as it's originally envisioned as a trilogy, it places the performance of the play at the House Absolute at the dead center of Book of the New Sun, because it's in the middle of Claw the Conciliator, which is right in the middle of this as a trilogy. Okay, so the storytelling contest offsets it a little bit, but the idea being that the ending of the series is directly in the middle of the trilogy.
That's crazy. That's so crazy to plan it that way.
And so, like, I'm not one of these people. If you go to any of the Gene Wolfe podcasts, they always spend a huge amount of time on Dr. Talos's play because it's dense and it's weird and it's tough to figure out. And there's a lot of things where you could ask me, why is that in the play? I go, oh. But as you read Urth of the New Sun, if you keep the play in the back of your head, you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of like a scene from that play. And so originally, like, why the ending of Citadel of the Autarch is the way it is because it's supposed to point you back. You reread it, you get to the play, and it's like, oh, this, you can kind of piece things together about what happens. Now, when Wolfe turns in Citadel of the Autarch, his publisher says, hey, you're not explaining enough about the ending here. Tap on a couple of paragraphs being like, and so Severian went out into space and he brought back the new sun and here's what happened, and basically explain everything in 2 paragraphs. And Wolfe fights him on it, says, I'm not going to do that. And there's a bit of a conflict there. And the compromise is, okay, leave Citadel as it is, but then write us a final book and have it sort of tie together some of the loose ends. But you can explain things, but kind of on your own terms. And so Wolf starts figuring out what he's going to do with Urth of the New Sun before the last books of the main four have even been published. Okay. So some people are averse to reading Urth because they're like, well, was it tacked on? Was he just pressured into writing it? And it's like, it wasn't a part of his original plan of it as a trilogy. But as he's completing those books, he starts figuring out what he's going to do in this volume. And so that's why it organically fits in. And to not to digress too much, but to point to, and this is one of my favorite things that I came across when rereading Book of the New Sun. This is in chapter 2 of Shadow of the Torturer. So Severian is talking about him as a boy. He's playing in the mausoleum, and he says, yet sometimes, particularly in the sleepy hours around noon, there was little to watch. Then I turned again to the blazon over the door and wondered what a ship, a rose, and a fountain had to do with me, and stared at the funeral bronze I had found, and cleaned and set up in a corner. The dead man lay at full length, his heavy-lidded eyes closed. In the light that pierced the little window, I examined his face and meditated on my own as I saw it in the polished metal. My straight nose, deep-set eyes, and sunken cheeks were very much like his, and I longed to know if he too had dark hair. So it's like in chapter 2, Wolf says there's a seal over the door that has a ship flying over a fountain next to the image of a rose, which, like, all of that is stuff that's not really going to be explained in Book of the New Sun, but is in Urth. So he's planting things in the beginning of Shadow that aren't going to get paid off until the book that supposedly he wasn't even going to write. So that's a little bit of the background as to how this comes about.
I think I even remember, sorry to interrupt you, I think I even remember getting to the end of Citadel of the Autarch and thinking, well, how do those things fit into the story? Because I was expecting it, because it was so highly signaled there, with the whole entire quote, I think, right in that section about how we think ourselves the inventors of symbols, but they in fact invent us. So I was fully expecting something with that. And so, yeah, that's so fascinating. Go on.
Well, that's basically it. So that's how Urth comes about. And yeah.
Well, there you
I feel
go.
like we're in spoiler territory at this point, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's probably time because there's just too much to not do. So
I will say really quickly, I do wish that Tor had done a Urth of the New Sun version like this with Don Mates' artwork. Yeah, just personally.
The fact that there is no Don Mates cover for Urth of the New Sun is like a deep wound to me. Like, this is the best you get, and even that, it's like but most of the Urth of the New Sun covers are just hideous.
Yeah, mine that has like the sun emblem type thing on the front. I'm like, oh, it's fine. Like it looks kind of cool, but it could have. It's not like I have the Shadow of the Torture. I have a print of it up on my wall, right? Like I love it. It's one of my favorite covers of all time. So
I like the Urth of the New Sun cover with the ship sails and the starry background. That's my favorite cover for Urth of the New Sun. But
it's very cool.
But yeah, it does feel like it's such, like, artwork wise, it does look like it's so aside from Book of the New Sun. And gosh, it feels so integral. And I really appreciated that backstory, Sam, because that does add a lot of context.
100%. Yeah. 100%. So with that being said, if anybody is watching this and has not read the book, which I find to be surprising, but just in case, this is your spoiler warning. So this will obviously spoil not just this, but the 4 books in the Book of the New Sun that preceded it as well, right? So there's your warning, okay? So when we leave off at the end of Citadel, I'm going to kind of introduce, like I said, I have each like 5 to 6 little chunks of the story. I'll give a little pitch here, quick synopsis, and then we can kind of chat about it, I think. So we leave off at the end of Citadel, and basically it's like he's just gotten to the point where it's now, let's go get on the ship and see if we can bring the new sun. And of course, the presumption is that he succeeds because, you can go back and reread the series and there's signs and blah, blah, blah. So when we start this book, there's like a few little pieces that I picked out when I went back through my notes. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. There is so overwhelmingly much that happens in this book. Okay. So one, he's throwing another copy of the story out into space.
Yeah.
And this is after he had thrown the copy into the black hole that presumably Gene Wolfe found and translated and gave us the Book of the New Sun. So this is at least the 3rd copy that he's written, because he had talked about writing another copy before. As we learned later in this book, he had sort of said the story, vocally, whatever. So he's told the story again at least 4 times, all this kind of thing. But he's throwing another copy out. I don't know where that goes. If someone picks it up or whatever, I don't know. But interesting that he just keeps doing this same thing. I think there's a couple other kind of key points that sets up the rest of the book. One is he runs into those hierojewels again, Ossipago, Barbatus, and Fumilamus, which are, I'm having fun with those names now. Originally, I really hated them and struggled. Now they're fun. And they kind of set up this whole idea of now there's not just hierojewels, there's hierogrammates. There's like this hierarchy of these different beings. And they tell Severian he needs to serve Zadkiel. He doesn't really know who this is, but we're introducing this character of Zadkiel. And this is supposedly their first time meeting Severian, which is, again, more confirmation, making it more concrete and clear that these people move backwards through time. And so them meeting Severian for the first time here is Severian's then apparently last time meeting them in his lifetime. That's why he remembers them, but they don't know him yet. Whereas back in, was that book 3, when he met up with them, they knew him, but he didn't know them, right? So it's making all that stuff more clear, which I really appreciated.
Which is not the last time that will happen in the
right,
book.
Exactly. We had all the weird assassination stuff, right? These people that like came up to him. It was Idis, Pern, Sidero, and Gunny, right? These people who, there's just all this stuff going on with multiple of these people tried to kill him. It seems like they were maybe sent by Abaya, as we learn later, that they're trying to stop Severian from bringing the new sun. So we're seeing again that big like cosmic level conflict that's happening is making that just a little bit more clear. There's some crazy, like he puts Sidero on like a suit of armor, which is just weird, and like pilots him like a mech, and it's like a weird, he's like a android kind of like Jonas was, or I think it was Idis that was like one of the Undyne, like the women that just keep growing and that sort of thing. It was like a baby version. There's weird stuff that goes on with Gunny that we'll get to later. And then he sort of falls down this like thing and lands, and there's this weird creature, and it's like there's all this weird stuff with this shaggy dog creature, and we find there's all these weird animals that are here, and like why are they here? And this creature turns out, then it turns into like this little weird gremlin thing called Zach, who can't really talk, and then this thing just keeps changing. So I want to pause there because there's obviously a lot going on there that was very confusing for me and was really unexpected. I was like, what are we doing? What is this? And all of it comes back around to matter later. So, trust the process. But nonetheless, it felt overwhelming. So do either of you have anything that really jumped out at you, either that you found interesting or like themes or thoughts that came up, or just anything, noteworthy that kind of came from this early section of the book where we're on the ship initially?
I guess what I would just add to that is how I love the beginning of the book, and how he does have that quote, having cast one manuscript into the seas of time, I now begin again. Such an interesting line. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Starting all over again?
Uh-huh.
And he talks about the absurdity of anybody finding the manuscript, and yet he carries on from there. I don't know if you two would agree with me, but I've said this many times in videos about how I feel like the first half of this book feels like it feels like a departure. It's a literal departure because we're on a ship from Earth, but it feels very different than the previous books, like in tone and atmosphere. And what are we dealing with these people, with this creature, this hairy dog creature that starts to transform. So I did feel like I was suddenly in a different type of series all of a sudden, and I wasn't sure where we were going with it. But yeah, I think that right away we're left to wonder what the heck is going on with this voyage, and like you said, with the time interlap between him and the hero jewels, I think, or is it hierarchs? I get them so confused all the time. So yeah, I'm trying to think if I have more to add at this point. I can say really quickly with the shaggy dog creature that turns out to be Sadkill, right? That's correct, right? And as he continues to transform, one thing that came up in my thoughts while I was reading this book over and over again was this idea of between humans and animals. That seemed to come up in my thoughts quite a bit. Like Wolf was maybe trying to say something about that, about our role as humans and animals. And then what's interesting is I was looking back at at the series at large, and I noticed, well, we kind of have that all along. Like we have that at the very beginning of book one with his relationship with uh oh, I'm blanking on the name.
Triskele, the dog.
Yes, yes, the dog. And then also the man ape
Mhm.
situation that happens in the second book. And then in sort of the lictor, I actually had it marked in my journal that I felt like this was something that came up again, the humans and animals theme, when I guess it's when he is, let's see, mm, young Severian accepts old Severian, holds his hand, and they discuss the difference between being a human and an animal, and how some animals hate the burden of thought and either want to die, sleep, drink, or have a lobotomy and live as animals. So when a man becomes an animal, he becomes a dangerous kind, a zoanthrope. So it's like when we were talking about the zoanthropes in Sort of Lictor. I don't know if you remember that at all, but
For sure.
I
Yeah.
happen to have that in my journal as well. So I don't know if there is a larger theme to be discussed between humans and animals, but I just know that that kept percolating in my thoughts, specifically in Earth of the New Sun. And then once I started to look back, I started to see it here and there throughout the series.
Yeah, that's just super quickly. I had as you were talking about that, I just had like a thought that this might be total nonsense. This is very half baked. Okay. But you saying that made me think of, there's a part towards the end of this book where Severian is like despairing at the idea of this burden that he is now carrying. And he's like, man, I wish I could just fail at this and just go live a simple life and do this thing.
Mm.
And it kind of like, it's almost the reverse of that evolution, quote unquote. And then there's also the literal evolution that we learn later of, maybe the man apes then evolved into what humankind is now, who then may evolve into these, hyro whatever beings. And so we have like this sort of cyclical nature of that, which is literally what happens to this shaggy dog thing that goes from animal to simple creature to more refined creature to angel, you know what I mean? So I'm like, it's just
Yes.
all.
That maybe
It's
there's an evolution of sorts that
Yeah.
he is also exploring, and also maybe a critical examination of like the hierarchy that we create between man and animal. And I think that maybe even there's some discussion that could be had about that. I'm not really sure how he's approaching that with the man apes in book two, but I kind of feel like there could be a connection there. And then also like what you're saying, because the whole idea with the hierojoules, if I got that right, is that, oh, I'm going to get this confused and I apologize, but Sam, you can correct me. There's this idea about using humans in order to evolve the species, these higher beings, species. So it's like humans are kind of being exploited for this evolutionary cause. And again, so you can kind of critique the hierarchy there, that we're just puny things that are being used for a bigger cause, that maybe we don't matter as much in the grander scheme of things. And it also just makes me think about how we look at animals on our planet and how does that translate if we go to other planets and encounter other beings? Like how, like how we have this fixed idea of man being the higher being on the totem pole, and how that affects us if we are really to encounter intelligent life on other planets. I don't know. This is where my thoughts went.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is another, like, I mean, right off the bat, we're getting this, and I'm sure we will talk about this ad nauseum throughout the discussion, this conflict within the character of Severian, of like, Severian is a torturer. Like, this is the first thing that we learn about him. This is consistent throughout the entire series.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes gruesomely so, sometimes very uncomfortably so. And also, Severian, like, is a savior character. And one of the things that you see consistently is him having, not like in every circumstance, but we see several notable examples of him having mercy or compassion, not just on people, but also on animals. So this is like one of the jokes that you'll get on the people who do like dark humor memes about Book of the New Sun. They'll be like, oh, Severian did nothing wrong because he saves a dog at the beginning of the book. It's like, R. But like, I get what people mean of like, that's one of the first. I mean, the book begins with a save the cat moment of him, saving Triskele. So there's certainly something to that, because then also he's the only one seemingly on the ship who's looking out for Zach, who's trying to take care of him. And then Zach obviously ends up evolving or progressing into this really powerful, not an angel, but like an angelic type being. And that plays into, just on this theme of authority, that plays into a big element that we have throughout Book of the New Sun, which is authority and jurisdiction coming in very unexpected ways. So the first time that we meet the Autarch in Shadow of the Torturer, he's like this little, like, he is presenting himself as essentially a pimp running a brothel. And he's like this really like unassuming, character that you almost read and forget about. And then the next time you meet him, he's like, what, essentially a janitor, in the House Absolute. When you see him, that's how he's presenting himself. He wears like all these different hats. And so he comes in very unexpected, one could say like humble ways. You expect him to come in authority and majesty and power, and he doesn't.
Doesn't even come across, I mean, am I remembering this right? Doesn't even come across slightly effeminate in that, in that area too?
Mm-hmm. Because he's been castrated from having failed the test beforehand. Which is why, once again, it took me a reread before I was like, oh, duh. I'm like, why does the Autarch carry the Alzabo elixir in like a little phallus around his necklace? Like, how weird. Whoa, what is that? That's so weird. And then it was like, oh, duh, because this is the only way to essentially pass on his line. Like,
to carry on his seed.
Exactly. Like, this is the symbol of reproduction. It's like, oh, like, duh, obviously. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't make it not weird, but it's not there for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And in a similar way, you have that in the character of Severian, where the most unexpected person you would expect to become the Autarch to save the world is not just a torturer, but a torturer's apprentice. And so that theme of authority coming in unexpected ways, you have that kind of to the nth degree with Zach here in the beginning, which becomes important when we get to the later sections at Yesod.
I love this. And can I jump one further with that? I feel like another theme that I found really interesting in the series, considering he is a torturer, and I feel like this came through with the excellent quotes that I know I noted when I read Sword of the Lictor, and that is of obedience, because he talks about in Sword of the Lictor how one of the aspects of being a torturer is obedience beyond anything else. Like, you're going to be obedient no matter what. You're going to follow through no matter how horrible the act is. And I mean, he's trained that way. And we see his training in the first book, in Shadow of the Torturer, like how far it goes in order to make sure that he has no mercy, even though he does eventually break that. Clearly, interesting juxtaposition there. But I feel like that's also brought up at the beginning of this book, when he encounters, I'm forgetting her name. What's her name? The person who calls herself Alfetta. And when Alfetta basically calls him a monster, and the idea behind choosing Severian to do this task, to bring the new sun, my understanding of that was because he is somebody who is so obedient that he will do the task down to the end, that is part of his identity, or part of what it means to be a torturer, or torturer's apprentice, I suppose. So it's just interesting to think about that idea of obedience, in addition to what you were saying about authority, and then that kind of critical stance on authority.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. I'm excited we'll get to the Apheda stuff here very soon. Actually,
sorry, I jumped ahead.
No, it's a great segue, because that's like literally the next thing I had written down. But really quick, I want to say hi to Brian. What's up, man?
Hey, Brian.
And then also, Eric had I don't know this term.
Kabbalistic.
It's basically like isn't it like Judaism? Am I wrong about that? Let me know, because I don't really know much about the Cabal.
I was going to say, this is like the biggest, because whenever I talk about Urth of the New Sun, people are like, oh, and stuff with the Kabbalah. I'm like, sorry, that's above my pay grade. So I guess I'll have to wait for Dave Butler to talk about that. But yeah.
Interesting. Okay, fair enough.
Jewish mystical teachings that seek to explain the hidden spiritual nature of God, the universe, and the human soul. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just not knowledgeable in that area, but
interesting.
So interesting.
Yeah. There's all kinds of There's all kinds of stuff like that going on. Yeah, mystical side of Judaism.
Oh, thank you, Brian.
Mazel tov. Okay. Cool.
Also,
Okay, well, like I said, that's a great segue into our next little section here, which I called Yesod and the Judgment. So we have this such an amazingly vivid mental image of this moment when we pass through the edge of the universe to get into this other universe. It was crazy, and it was just the closest thing I can describe the image in my head of this is like is that the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie where they flip the ocean upside down when the green sun goes by or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
It like that's the closest way I can describe it, but it was just such a cool mental image. Anyway, we learned that the current universe is called Bria or Bria, whatever, and then we enter this new universe called Yesod. And this is where we're still on the ship, and this is where this woman that Joanna mentioned shows up, and she's basically like, "Hey, I have this person here who's going to bring the new sun." We call him the epitome, which I thought was like that makes it more clear. Also, what we're doing with Severian and the new sun thing is that name of epitome, but it's this other person that's not Severian. So we're like, wait, what? I thought the whole point was that Severian was supposed to do this, and we're going towards this judgment thing, and we find out that it's Zach, that he's again evolved and changed a little bit. Now he's this person who's being presented as the epitome, and we're going through, and Severian's like he's supposed to be taking him through towards the judgment thing, and the whole time he's like, this is supposed to be me, dude, what's going on? Which kind of aligns also with Joanna, what you were saying about like obedience and like carrying out the thing that he was told he's supposed to do. And as he's going through, I thought it was interesting. He's walking through this corridor and had these like window panes where he's seeing events from his past, but like through the perspective of the people that he tortured and killed. And that was such an interesting way to kind of flip that on its head. He gets into the courtroom and he's like, you know what? This is my thing. And he takes the handcuffs off and puts them on himself and presents himself now to do this. There's a weird piece of this that I'm not 100% clear on, but it's like he gets there for this, and then we kind of back up and we're like, oh, actually, we're not doing the judgment just yet, because he goes and has this encounter with Apheda again. So maybe you guys can help me clear that up. But we have another Severian is quite the ladies' man in these books. So we have another. But here I thought one thing that stuck out to me on this one was at the end afterwards, and he had this statement about how he felt that he was born through them coming together, that it was like this combination of Earthling and hierarch, of Urth and Yesod. It was like this combination of the two universes and that sort of thing. Which my hypothesis is that event is what created the White Fountain, which is a hilariously on the nose metaphor, but is also interesting. But anyway, then we get to the actual judgment. And now Zach, further evolved, is the judge. So again, weird, trippy stuff with that. Now he's kind of looking like that angelic figure. It looks like how we describe like seraphim in the Bible and that sort of thing. And he's describing here, and again, I think it's an instance of talking through like things that were hinted at in the 4 books, but are now made a little bit more clear. So he's talking about this sort of cycle of evolution. Humanity's evolved from the man apes, and now they're eventually will become sort of what he is. This cycle's happened before. Severian's been sort of guided towards this purpose, and this is where he learns like the truth of what he needs to do, which is not just to bring the new sun and continue the he thinks it's to continue life on Earth, basically, right? But now he's learning, I'm going to destroy Earth for this to happen, to then bring about the chance of this next evolution, this next cycle to continue. And then the last thing I have noted right here is that they then, after this, and they're like, hey, you passed the test. Like, this is, you've been guided for this. This is sort of what we've been doing. Now he's like really burdened by this idea that he's going to have to do this. And they eventually is going to get to, he's going to continue to do the thing. But this is, I think, another good place to pause for a second of this. Now we've gotten to the different universe of Yesod. We've learned the truth of what he's going to do. And we've made it a little bit more clear, this like cyclical nature of life and evolution that's sort of the overarching story, in a sense, that the hierojules, the hierarchs, whatever, are trying to do this because it assures their existence, right? They need this to happen. They're using humans, like we talked about, to do this. And then, like we got in the first section of the story, these assassins sent by Abaya to stop it from happening. That Abaya and Erebus, like we learned in the other 4 books, are trying to stop this thing from happening. So let me pause there again. Thoughts, feelings, themes, ideas. What do we got here, guys?
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. You first.
I was just gonna say briefly, sort of the way, like, and this is just more of like a pulp culture reference point that you can kind of see what the Hyrule are doing is. Have you guys seen Interstellar, the Christopher Nolan
Yes,
movie?
but it's been a while.
Okay, Joanna hasn't seen it, so I won't spoil it. But there's a very there is a similar thing that there's a sequence near the end that gets very trippy. And what is happening with the humans from the future there is essentially what the Hyrule are doing. So if you need like a pop culture touch point to be like, we're going into the past to try to ensure that what happens in the future actually, like, we're able to set up the foundation building blocks. There's a similar type of idea here with the Hyrule as well.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I would just say that huge moral questions are brought forth right here because we had no idea up until this point that in saving Urth, he would be destroying so many people, and that it was basically it's basically like a rebirth is what we're going for at this point, right? And then the other thing that was odd in this section, of course, we know that Afeta, is it Afeta? That she's not exactly human, that she's wearing a mask and kind of like the Hero Jewels in Sword of the Lictor, and she doesn't have a tongue. That was really weird. Just want to add that. But she also brings up and answers some questions for him and explains that, as you were describing with the people from his past that are presented, that she clarifies that her people drew Severian's ghosts. So those are like ghosts from his memories, who hated him, the people who hated him most from his mind, and that they are used to be Severian's defenders as reparation for all the lives that will be lost with the new sun. So it's an interesting inner trial. When he's going through that section, I think I wrote life review in the margin of my journal because that's what it reminded me of. Like, he goes through that tunnel, the Earth-like windows and mirrors and books. And it felt to me almost like what I've heard before of people who've like reported having a near-death experience, and that they see flashes of their life go before them, and all the times when not only they were hurt, but when they hurt other people and seeing through their eyes. And that's basically what it reminded me of. And yet, you expect when somebody goes through a situation like that, that they are going to feel quite a bit of remorse and maybe be changed and softer in some ways. And I don't think that that's exactly how Severian reacts in that moment. I think he pretty much stands up to those ghosts and say, it was for justice. He has some kind of line about that. So
yeah,
I guess that's what I would say about that section. And as far as going through the trial and then meeting Zadkiel, who turns out to be, turns out to be the same person all along as Shaggy Dog, and that's who is judging him. It's so strange because we're expecting this formal trial, so to speak, and it doesn't really end up being like that. It seems like he gets there and it's like, oh, you've succeeded. It's like, what? That was a trial? I didn't realize I went through the trial. But it makes sense when you think about it as well, because of that whole entire situation would have, I think it would have been very unsettling, disturbing for anybody else. And it makes me wonder too, if he passed that, what would it be like to not pass that? And if he didn't pass that, I guess, and so, okay, this is what I'm guessing. I'm sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong here in my thinking, so I'm not jumping too far ahead. When he goes through that hallway with the mirrors and windows, and then he sees all the ghosts from the past, well, she talks about them being his defenders, but is that whole entire situation, and so is that the trial? Is that what the trial is? I guess I'm trying to remember correctly. Do we have a formal trial at all?
So my understand if it is, and I don't know that it's spelled out of like, and the trial starts here and then it ends here. My understanding would be that it essentially begins when he first encounters Zach, that he's being
Ah,
judged on that from like when he first encounters all the way up to when he's like, oh, by the way, it's over, and you passed and we're sending you back to Earth.
okay.
Yeah.
I guess the reason I'm asking is if he passed the trial, what would it look like if he had failed the trial? Like what would the situation have
Yeah.
been had he failed?
I,
Because
I
obviously,
think,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were
Oh,
done.
I was just thinking about like he'd be unmanned is what we understand, and then we'd have to move on to the next possible successor. But I guess I'm just thinking, so he passed. What would have happened if he had failed? Like what would he have done with Zach?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know what Zach would have. I assume we would continue the cycle. That he would basically become what the autarch was, that like when we first found the autarch, where he's living as the autarch, as the ruler, whatever, and has to pass it on to somebody who he deems to be worthy. And then that person goes on the ship and goes through, like, it's literally the entire cycle all over
No,
again.
I understand that. That's not my question. My question
Okay.
is like, what would he have done to fail? You know what I mean? Like, so he
Oh,
succeeded.
what would make him
So
deemed unworthy?
yes, what would have made him be deemed
Um,
unworthy? And
maybe.
what did he
hmm,
do that was made him deemed worthy? I guess could be a flip side of that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Sam has other ideas too. The things that come to mind for me is one, sort of the way that he treats Zach. That I'm trying to remember I don't remember all the nuances of how he did it. But maybe there's something to do with that. But I think the other thing that sticks out to me too is the idea of being the epitome of Earth. That he represents the entire spectrum of what humanity can represent. And so I think that in and of itself is part of, like that's what they're looking for, I think, is somebody who can be the torturer and the rapist and this horrible person, but also can be the person who saves the kid from the Alzaba who's attacking, and the who adopts little Severian and is sad when he's gone, and that sort of
Hmm.
thing. That's my thinking on it. I don't know.
Jake, I think you're right on both counts, because I think it is both. So on the one hand,
Okay.
just to touch on the epitome of Earth thing, this is sort of where there was in the there was a bit of a back and forth on X about some things from Book of the New Sun, where I don't know if you guys know Parker Case, but he's a
Yeah.
philosopher, does YouTube stuff. But he was saying that he thought like that Book of the New Sun was directly like a response to Dune. And some people were saying, no, that's not it. Now, there certainly is a connection there. And one of the connections is that what's the name? For the Bene Gesserit line breeding that they're trying to do. They're trying to create the
Kwisatz Haderach.
thank you. So
Yeah.
they're trying to create the Kwisatz Haderach. And essentially, like it's a different world, it's set up differently, but essentially that's what Severian
Yeah.
is the row of dominoes perfectly lined up to have this one figure
Yeah.
who can
Ah,
be the one that accomplishes this task for
Yeah.
us. Now, obviously that kind of goes all sideways in Dune, but for
Right.
Severian, and what makes him the epitome of Earth is not just that he was able to go and do all this stuff, but also that he has this memory that he talks about ad nauseum of
Mhm.
like, I have a perfect memory, I forget nothing. And so because of that, when he takes the Alzabo analeptic, not only is it because we hear about this happening with like Vodalus's followers, and they get these like hallucinations, they get these visions, they have these things that they can remember from these other people's lives to try to recover lost information. But essentially that passes after a short period of time. So Vodalus and his followers aren't walking around
Right.
with other people living inside of their minds. But because Severian has this mental gift, and because the claw brings people back to life, thus he has Thekla living inside of him, and he calls himself Legion at one point,
Mhm.
which is
oh
it's kind of funny.
yeah.
After
Oh,
he takes in the autarchs, because he has a whole legacy of people going back, hundreds,
Yeah.
if not thousands of years, all living within him. So not only is he the epitome of Earth in terms of his moral character, but also in terms of he has men living in him, he has women living in him, he has from a
Yep.
whole plethora of backgrounds. And so because of that, he's able to be a true epitome of Earth.
Yeah.
So that's the one hand. And then the other hand is you're right, I think, his treatment of Zach, that he is the only one who fights for him, stands up for him, when there's no real like material benefit for him protecting this little gremlin creature. And to pull out my Bible soapbox for a moment, this is actually something that Jesus talks about in one of his parables, where he says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, he'll gather together all of the, and the word in the Greek is the word for the Gentile, the pagan nations. He'll gather all of them before him, and he'll separate the sheep from the goats. And he judges them distinctly differently, because to the sheep, he says, come into the kingdom that's been prepared for you, because you saw me hungry, you gave me food, you saw me naked, you gave me clothing, you saw me sick, and you came and you visited me. So enter the kingdom. And they say, well, when did we see you hungry? When did we see you naked? When did we see you sick? And he says, because you did it to the least of my brothers, you did it to me. Enter the kingdom that's prepared for you. And to the goats, he says the opposite. You saw me hungry, naked, sick, and you didn't do those things. So depart into eternal darkness. And they say, when did we see that? And it's because you didn't do that to the least of my brothers. And so in a certain sense, there's that idea playing out with the Zach storyline, where because Zach is the least of creatures, there's no benefit to Severian. It's not like he's cynically defending him because he knows it'll benefit him, in 20 chapters or what have you.
Yeah.
Because of that compassion, he did it to the least of creatures. He passes, enter the kingdom, etc. So there's a biblical idea being played with there as well about compassion.
Interesting. Okay, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate this thoughtful answer to the question. So maybe we could say the trial started from even the very beginning of Severian's story. Another thing, though, and I maybe answered this earlier too, because Afeta does directly tell him in this chapter 2, or in this area, in this section, that he was chosen. Gosh, I had it right in front of me and now I don't. That he was chosen because he meted out the harshest justice. That was, maybe that's not the whole of the answer though, but that's what she says.
I think that's, so I had a thought while Sam was talking, that it was like a little light bulb moment for me that I think connects exactly to this, Joanna, which was the idea of the epitome, and he's got all these whatever memories, etc., but also his moral code, like Sam said. And like you're saying here, the harshest justice. For this whole thing to work, he's got to save the world, but he has to destroy it. So he has to be willing, he has to be bad enough to be willing to mete out the harshest justice, destroy everything.
Yeah.
But also good enough to see that it's worth a greater good. So like, I wonder if that's also part of why it specifically needs to be him, because he's the only one willing to do such a horrible thing, the most harsh justice in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah.
It's brutal. I mean, like I said, I think that was the section that brought me back to Sword of the Lictor, because I was haunted by that quote in Sword of the Lictor where he talked about the difference between being a torturer and any other person, and how it's somebody who is willing to do that.
Yeah.
And we even see that in Severian, that like dog on a bone tenacity, of following through with things, with the whole, I've got to return this relic to the what are they called?
Pellerines.
Oh,
Thank you, to the Pellerines. So we even see that playing out in sort of a micro sense across those 4 books.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, when he returns the claw. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big test in and of itself, probably.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. That was really good stuff. I want to get into the next little section here, so we're not here for 6 hours, but this is great. I'm so glad that we're doing this right now. Okay. So we have all that stuff happen. They're like, okay, this is you. We're going to send you out to do this thing. So they send him. He gets back on the ship. Here's where he starts. This is the beginning of one of my favorite aspects of this whole book that kind of goes through the whole rest of the book, which is now he's sensing a piece of himself on this distant thing. And throughout the whole rest of the book, we're slowly progressing into that thing's getting closer. He feels that presence more strongly. He even starts to refer to his physical body in the third person sometimes. And it's the coolest thing. I love it. It's one of my favorite aspects. Okay, so I just want to bring that up. So that starts happening. He's like thinking about this whole journey and all this stuff. And there was a really cool quote about how I didn't write down the exact quote, but like how outward appearances and how somebody feels within themselves don't always match. Like this idea of he's terrified and tortured so many people, but he's so often been afraid himself. And I think that's getting back to how he's feeling about this whole thing. But then what kind of spurs this next part of his journey is he goes and he meets up with Gunny. Like he wants to not feel alone in this moment, right? Which is part of his vulnerability. He goes and meets up with her and sees this like younger version of her, Burgundafara, which is such a crazy name.
Awful name.
Awful
Sorry.
name.
I hate that
Awful
name.
name. Gunny 2. Where
Doesn't appear in many baby books.
no, but he meets this person, and it's another instance of that that explains some of the weird stuff we saw earlier in the book, of these weird time loops that happen on the ship, that it kind of goes in and out of time in some ways, and there's different timelines of the same person in the same area. But we see this younger version of her, which makes it click in his mind about, I was Apu Punch-Out. So we finally are getting, and we'll come back to this more strongly later, of this explaining a little bit more of what happened at the end of book 2, which was just so weird. But now they go to Urth, and this is where we get the whole gospel idea, right? Where this Burgundafar wants to go back to her village, and along the way, Severian's like performing these miracles, and he's healing people. He's stopping this horrible storm. He has to fight off this weird reanimated corpse that attacks him. He's like doing these things that are eventually going to become the legends of the Conciliator that he hears about in the other 4 books, right? Earlier in his journey. So he has, unbeknownst to him, went way into the distant past when they sent him back to Earth when he got off the ship. And he's doing all these things. They're getting captured by the guards, and Burgundafara points him out. It's like Judas betraying Jesus. And he gets captured, goes to the Metachin Tower. He's seeing this place that is really different from how he knew it to be when he was there, in this case, in the distant future. There's like a woman who's there who's like has a position of power, which is crazy. But anyway, so he's there, he's a prisoner. He tells the story of the new son, and he's telling, these most recent things that have happened to him of doing these miracles, and somebody in the cell next to him hears it, and he's like, oh, that's a cool story. I'm going to write that down. And that becomes another version of the Book of the New Sun that I think, Sam, you said this in some video, that like maybe that's the version that focuses more strongly on the Conciliator and like that legend and everything like that. And then sort of
that's
the last,
what Dr. Talos
yes,
bases
exactly.
his play off of. That's the version that he read. Yeah,
That's
yes,
crazy.
That's right.
That's wild.
And the last piece of this little section here is that the people who've imprisoned him take him to Typhon, and we see the beginning, the earlier before of what we saw of Typhon in the 4 books, where this is like before he's been subdued, shall we say. This is before the mountains have been carved fully and all that kind of stuff. And Typhon at this point is the current ruler of Urth. And eventually Severian escapes and goes to this weird, sort of like the corridors of time. I don't know if it's explicitly the same corridors of time that they've referenced before, but it sort of connects these 2 universes and allows for time travel, right? So let me pause again there, because there's a whole lot going on with this. We go back to the ship, we find this younger version of Gunny, we go back to the planet of Urth, we perform these miracles, we're doing this Conciliator stuff, we get captured, we meet the big bad once again, and then we escape, and we want to go do something else, right? As the new sun has slowly been getting a little bit closer. So that's kind of where we're at now. Thoughts?
Oh, yeah. So I am trying to recall the order of things a little bit. Thank you so much for rehashing that. When he goes back, are we talking in this section? Is this the same section where he heals the 15-year-old girl?
Yes.
Helena with the withered arm, and then the guy from the sickness, and he's performing all these miracles. Yeah, I have this quote that I wrote down from that section. Where is it? I had become a miracle monger, whether I liked it or not. And miracle mongers are not obeyed, as are autarchs. So, yeah, it seems like he's not. It's unsettling for him. And he seems to be going through a lot of struggle with this situation, even as he's like healing people and being followed by this young girl and the other guy. And obviously he had that weird situation with that female leader that you're talking about, who was on the page for like 2 seconds. You feel like it's really important, and suddenly she's just gone. I think this is also the section of the book where he says some of the more disturbing things about women and the whole relationship with the awful name I cannot even begin to pronounce, Burgundophilia. What do we say?
Gundafara.
Burgundafara. That is the ugliest name. I'm so
It's so
sorry.
bad.
It's so ugly. But it's very unsettling, this section, how she basically puts herself open to him and like, oh, you could have your way with me, and doesn't really clearly want it. And he has these reflections about women and how he feels himself better than other men because of the way he treats women, thinking about them. And my ex towards women had depended not only on my will, but upon their attitude towards me. And in other
Mhm.
words, he feels that when he raped Yolenta at the end of book 2, that she asked for it, that she wanted it. And oh, that was so gross. Yeah, that was the most disturbing part of the book for me personally.
Hmm.
Uh, and I will say this, and not to digress too much, because I know there's a lot more that you brought up in this section, Jake. Like, you brought up the star that just keeps on coming up in his presence over and over again, and the fact that he sees his body and outside of himself, and
It's so
there's
cool.
some really crazy things that happen in this whole section that I love. And I also love that whole bit about what we were just saying about how he's telling a story in the cell, and then somebody overhears it, and Sam said that he believes that that's the the play in book 2 and called The Conciliator. Just brilliant stuff, I have to say. Brilliant, brilliant stuff. But the stuff towards women was really unnerving for me. And I think one of the things that makes that difficult is that as much as we talk about his obedience and almost like it's a severe thing, right? And he was brought up in such a sadistic way, and he was trained to be a torturer. He was trained to have no mercy, even though he does have it at times. Um, all that even with all of that, I still feel like he does seem to have, and maybe this is me projecting on Severian, maybe this isn't accurate. He does seem to have a moral conscience about the fact that he's going to destroy Earth. And in fact, he seems to sympathize with the guy on the ship who I'm forgetting the name of, who wants to kill him or is against him because he
Mhm.
realizes, oh, he's against me because he thinks I'll bring down Earth. Oh, wait, he's right. And
Yeah.
there's some conscience he has about that. And I think the thing that makes it unsettling for me, and I'm trying to find the best way to articulate it. This is something that's been in my thoughts and is brewing there for a long time. Is I actually feel as though Severian is actually pretty. And it's going to sound weird, but I actually feel like he's quite kind to other people for the most part. In most instances, he is never attacking people outright or hurting people outright unless he's in a position of defending himself or needing to. Uh, I don't think he is necessarily like in all the intents and purposes, he almost seems like a good person to me. Like when I read the
Mm.
story, except when it comes to women, and it's just with women, and I'm like, why does it have to be just with women? Like that's
Mm.
where it's a little weird for me. And this is also to say, I'm not saying that Wolf should have written a different book than he wrote. I'm not saying this shouldn't be in the book. I'm not arguing with things being in the book. I'm just saying I grapple with it because if somebody's going to be a morally questionable person, why make it only about women? And two, um, I think this is my own personal thing, my own personal struggle is that I went into this book with the expectation that there would be some kind of redemption arc or something like that and that was totally misunderstanding on my part, messed up expectations on my part based on what I had inferred from other people's comments and discussions about this book and ways they said, "Oh, you will understand why the male gaze is there. Just keep reading, keep reading." And I'm like, yes, there are very complicating factors when it comes to Severian's identity and the fact that he has consumed the consciousness of the autarch, the fact that he has consumed Jolenta in book 2.
Mhm.
But I get to this section and I'm like, why? It kind of numbs me to having any wanting to have any sympathy for him because I feel like in our society today, I feel like we're way too sympathetic towards misogynists. I'm sorry to say that, but it really upset me to read this part. It was a bit of a disappointment for me personally. Again, not arguing with it being in the book, just having my own personal internal struggle with it.
Yeah. I don't have anything super amazing to say other than I think you're right. It's definitely a rough thing for sure. And I might be mistaken. Sam, it might have been you I was talking about this with, about like some of why that is in there is maybe like a thematic connection to like bringing life to the new universe, and like exerting his will over completing the task of bringing the new universe. And it's like that's his, I guess that could be a metaphor for like how he treats women in some way, and how it's always about sex, and it's always about reproduction, and it's about bringing life, and it's about him doing, I don't know, exerting his will in this way. I don't think that's a perfect one for one. And I'm not excusing it by any means. Obviously it's bad, but I wonder if at least there's that sort of thematic through line that way, maybe. That's the only thing I can think of about like why that was the specific way that Severian was described as being a bad person. I do agree with you very much that we can probably lean into him being a bad person in other ways as well to supplement the whole idea and make it even a little bit, dare I say, more effective. Not to critique a genius in his masterpiece, but like, nothing is perfect, right? So, and it at least would maybe land a little bit differently with people that way.
Yeah. I think maybe, it's hard. It's something I don't really have an answer for myself. It's something that I'm just grappling with. I'm like, why is that the one area, the one and only area we see him being really, truly awful? And two, I like the expectation thing, because I think I can't, and this is something I can't answer to either. But I mean, would my experience be different? Could I just at least have that psychic distance in my head to think of the story a little bit differently if had I gone into the very beginning thinking, okay, I'm following a misogynist rapist from beginning to end, and accepting that that is the journey of the character I'm following. You know what I mean? Whereas I went into it thinking, okay, he's sick, and getting the idea that, not to give away, I don't want to give away spoilers for Malazan, but like there's a horrible character in that series that later on I feel changes. And I love that character because I came to love that character because I feel like they did have a transformation. So, and I mean, like, yeah, this is tricky. This is a tricky topic. Anytime I see sexual violence in books, I do try to understand why it's there. Like, I want to see it through to the end to see what the author's trying to say and do with it. And in this case, I got to the end of this book, of this series, and that's the one piece that I struggled with still. Yeah.
So I guess is now a good time to jump in with.
Go for it, Dave. Yeah.
Please do. I was genuinely curious to hear your thoughts.
Right. So this is the part where it's like, yay, like Sam, dude, being like talking about really complicated issue. Like, this is a great look, guys. No, but I appreciate what both of you guys shared. And I guess there's I think there's a couple of things that are worth highlighting. And the first is, like, I agree with you, Joanna, that this is a part of the book, especially when I first read it, but still, that I found to be like really off-putting about Severian. And I think at this point, I've talked to, I'm not, like I said, I'm not an expert on the series, but I've talked to a lot of people who are fans of the series, and I have yet to meet somebody who read it and it's like, oh, Severian and him with the ladies, like a stud, a Chad, a player, like everybody's kind of like, get a grip, man. Like, this is not good. And so I guess why I bring that up is to say that it is something that Wolf is doing intentionally, and I think it's intentionally off-putting because I've yet to see somebody who reads it and is like, oh, this is good, we should emulate this.
Right. And I'm willing to believe that this is not Wolf suggesting this is good in any way. Yeah.
And I know you're a big fan of R. Scott Baker and his second Apocalypse series, and there's like dare I say, quite a bit more assault and significantly more graphic even in that series. And while it's certainly unpleasant to read, like, especially in Prince of Nothing, I read it and I'm like, Baker's doing something very specific and intentional
Yes.
here.
Mhm.
And now that doesn't mean that like, okay, so everybody should read this. Hey mom,
Right.
have I got a great
No.
series for you?
No, no, no.
But
Yeah.
it's like, okay, like at least there's something specific here. And I think that with Wolf, there's a couple things to think about. So one, like let's talk about this superficially in terms of the genre, which is like Wolf is writing, and Book of the New Sun is in the tradition of your sword and planet, your sword and sorcery type of novel. And I look at this, and I haven't met a ton of other people who see it the exact same way. So maybe this is just a kooky thing for me, but I look at this as almost Wolf doing a sort of write up or forcing you to look away at the way that often your typical sword and sorcery hero is presented. So let's take Conan for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
I love Conan. I am a huge Robert E. Howard fan. I probably have like 8 books of his. Jake, I know you were reading a bunch of the Conan stories recently, and like they're great.
They're
And
awesome.
Joanna, I think you've read.
I've read a little
Conan?
bit, and I have
Okay.
read a scene where he tried to rape a woman. So, yeah.
Well, and like Conan is like, like hero, lots of fun stories, but like he's
Mhm.
got a different chick in every
Yeah.
story. Often there's, I mean, it's in the 1930s, so there's nothing explicit, but it's
Yeah.
like, he's often betting the ladies. And if you kind of read it and you go on to the next one, it's like, okay, they're one-off stories. And I think Wolf is doing something a little bit more realistic with that type of idea, but being like, look, actually, not only is this bad for Severian, but also like this is destroying a lot of the people's lives. Like it would have been better for Dorcas had she not, slept with Severian. It would have been much better for Jolenta had Severian not assaulted her, had he not raped her. So I think there's a certain amount of, okay, we're going to take this thing that we see in a lot of pulpy sword and sorcery stuff, but you're not going to be able to look away, and you're going to see just how uncomfortable this would be if you played it out in a more realistic sense. So I think that's one part of it. I think the other thing is, honestly, like I think Joanna might be a bit nicer to Severian than I am in terms of his morality, because Severian is a torturer, is a murderer, is a cannibal. Like there's time after time things where I see him doing things that I'm like, that I do see as being like morally wrong and evil throughout it. Now I think women are especially treated badly. I mean, you even have, even besides the assault and betting tons of them, you've got in the first book where Agia doesn't want to be shouting Severian's name before the duel, and so Severian just like smacks her across the face. It's like, wow,
That did suck. But I also
one.
hated Agia. But no, that there is no like there's no excuse for that.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Yeah.
And so like, and I'll point to an easy example in Sword of the Lictor, when he goes in and is defending the family from the Alzabo, he essentially gets into a stalemate, and he tells the Alzabo, okay, we're in a stalemate here. Go off, run away, and then I'm not going to be hanging out with these guys tomorrow. So if you come back tomorrow, like I'm not going to be here to kill you. And
But
so the
doesn't he
Alzabo
trick them?
leaves.
I thought the whole idea was that he tricked the Alzobo, and then he ends up fighting the Alzobo.
So
And he does end up saving young Severian.
he ends up saving young Severian, while the mother and is it the grandfather, he waits in the bushes until after they're dead. And so
yeah, he was like too scared to act or whatever is what he said, right?
And so that leads to the whole question of like, how much do you believe Severian? How much do you trust
Right.
him with
He's a
some
very
of those
unreliable
things?
narrator, but
Yeah.
I still didn't see that as like him trying to set them up to get them killed. You know what I mean? Like I felt like that was more of like a desperate situation. I guess that's how I read it, but he's unreliable. So
Right.
there you
So
have it.
I guess it is that. It's a question of interpretation there. So
And also, sorry. Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
go for it.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I was just gonna say, I like, and I'll pick on somebody, and I'll pick on an author, I should say. I like Joe Abercrombie. Some of his books are fun. I've enjoyed roughly half of the books that I've read by him. But that's one thing that bugged me about the first Law books, is that Glokta, I felt, was a funny character, an entertaining character, but kind of sugar-coated. That we never really saw him torture any character that wasn't just an NPC. And that a character who, if you were to write him fully realistically, would be brutal and despicable and twisted, and would do that to people who also have internal lives and souls and destroy their lives by their craft. I felt like that was kind of sugar-coated around because isn't he fun? And he has this fun rhyme about porridge that he says with his broken teeth. And with Severian, I felt like Wolf is a lot more unflinching in seeing how, like, what a torturer would look like realistically and how messed up his worldview would be. So I guess I see more like cruelty and hurtful things that he does than maybe other people would. But I certainly agree with you that his treatment of women is rather poor.
And you might be right, and I might be overlooking a lot of the darker parts of the series with other people. But I'm also thinking of scenes like with Jonas. It felt like he had a real connection with Jonas. How he was with the Pellerines, the way that he was with the people in the camp, with young Severian. I guess I just didn't get the impression that he didn't want to do anything other than protect the family, even though the situation was complicated there. And I didn't get the sense that he actually even wanted to hurt Ajia, even though she was out to kill him. In fact, isn't he merciful towards her in
Later on,
the
yeah.
Conciliator?
Yeah.
And so I guess, like, given that, and then even situations with Dorcas, like in his mind, he actually considers himself at a loss or sad when they have to part. Yeah, I guess, like, there are several situations he feels a loneliness and a connection with oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name, the guy who is in that cool tower in Citadel of the
Master
Opera.
Ash. Yeah.
Yes. He
Yeah.
feels a connection with him, and I felt like an affinity with him. So I guess, like, I see several situations that kind of counter this description of an anti-hero. But then the one place where I feel like it comes out the most is with the women. And honestly, I did find it just ridiculous. Like, I was laughing at it in sort of the lictor. I'm like, this is so ridiculous. Anytime a woman comes into the room, she's going to end up naked and in bed with him within the next chapter. Like, it's ridiculous. But I did feel, and like I said, this could be just expectation because because even though you said, I don't know anybody who's like, yeah, the way he is with women, but I did have some people who said, yeah, read on, because you'll understand the purpose of this. And maybe it's just to understand that he's just a twisted, sick person. The sad thing about it, though, for me, is that I guess what I can say it did for me is, especially reading this part, it really just pushed Severian so far for me that when I read the rest of the story, I still really appreciate this book, and I'm excited to continue on talking about the rest. But sadly, like, even the scene that Jake had where he was so emotional, I was totally numb to it because I'm like, I just can't sympathize with this character. I mean, he's lost me. Like, I'm always open to the idea that a character can change, and obviously he does change. He changes a lot throughout this whole entire series in ways unfathomable, but in that way, that one regard, he doesn't. And yeah, it did sadly affect me as a reader.
For Urth specifically, and I'll just touch on two things, and this may be what people are referring to when they say that things change. First, and you guys will have to help me remind me, for Burgundafara, post, like, when we're going through the whole, like, Gospel of Severian section, does he sleep with her during that? Or is it like she presents himself and that's it?
I think that they do. If I remember
so.
correctly, they
Yeah.
do, and then she winds up with the captain,
Yes.
and he feels betrayed by her in that
He even
way.
like compares her to Gunny.
Yeah,
And,
I think
ugh,
so.
yeah.
Because I think what people, when they say, like, there's a change, is two things. One is there's a line, and I tried to find it, and I don't have the ebook, so I couldn't search for it. But there's a line when he first reaches the village, and people are asking about, like, him, who are you? And he has the famous line where he says he's a bad man who's trying to become good.
Yeah.
that's what
Everybody talks
people-
about that line. I remember reading that line.
Yep.
Mhm.
And
You
then the
didn't
other
save
part
it for me. Sorry.
and that's fair. And, like, and to be perfectly honest, I don't think there's anything that I'm gonna say that's like, oh, I love him now. And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to. I'm just trying to help give context as to, like, why maybe Wolf wrote it the way that he did. And then this is what Jake was alluding to. This is at the end of chapter 23. He says, Severian says, yet though I knew all this, my heart thought it was not so, that I, who had desired so desperately to succeed and had bent every effort toward success, had failed, and that I would now be permitted to reclaim the Phoenix throne, as I had in the person of my predecessor, to reclaim it and enjoy all the authority and luxury it would bring, and most of all the pleasure in dealing justice and rewarding worth that is in the final delight of power. All this while freed at last from the unquenchable desire of the flesh of women that had brought so much suffering to me and to them. Thus my heart was wild with joy, and I descended to the titanic forest of masts and spars, those continents of silver. And anyway, he goes on, but he goes back to the ship from there. And so this is where like people will talk about Severian because the end goal of, I don't know how you want to say it, his reproduction is to bring about the new sun, and you have that in that scene with Aphetta where the white fountain is kindled. Like that's the end goal of it, is that, and once again, this is what people will say about the book, is that he's sort of searching, as a subconscious thing, but he's sort of searching for that throughout the book. And that's why he says at the end there that he feels freed from it once he's accomplished the mission, once he's brought about the new sun. Now, that does not mean, oh, so that's okay. Oh, so it's treated well. Oh, so it's not unnerving. Oh, so I'm not off put by it. No, like all of that's still very much there. But I think that's some of what Wolf is getting at in terms of the bigger picture. Would it make it easier for me to recommend the series to everyone and to talk about it, and be like I said, hey, Mom, here's a book to read? I think so. I think it does make things more complicated. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm doing a lot of talking here, but I definitely know what you mean, and understand why it's a really challenging part of the books and of Severian there.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I think, I did explain how it affected my reading experience, but I'm also just interested in engaging like with why it's there, like what we're trying to say about this character and thematically how this is fitting into the story. And that's also where I'm just a little puzzled. I like when I mean, we don't need to digress to talk too much about other series, but you brought up Baker. And for me, even though I think that this is an area where Baker was very intentional with trying to be critical of misogyny and its display in fantasy. And at the same time, many readers did not quite get it. Like they didn't understand what he was doing. And he had to go as far as to say depiction does not equal endorsement.
Right.
And to me, the reason why in my eyes it was clear what he was doing is because he put so much intention into the character of Esmenet, who is a female character in that first book. And to the point where in my spoiler-free review, I ended up going into in-depth quotes about how she sees the world. And I feel like he is really putting himself as an author into this character's perspective. And so I guess that's the one challenge with Book of the New Sun is you're only in Severian's perspective. And so you're only seeing this very washed down view of the women. Not to say that they're all overly simplistic. Some of them are, in my opinion, sadly. Like I think Gunny and Burgundofara, however you say her name, is, I don't know. It's a very sad depiction of a female character, in my opinion. The way she's portrayed, those women or the woman is portrayed, I guess, in different timelines. But yeah, I think that is the challenge with this series, especially for somebody if they struggle with that kind of content. Is like, yeah, you're not going to get sensitivity to the victim at all. Which, like I said, I don't think you always have to. I just think I would like to understand. And if anybody in the comment section who watches this wants to go into depth, feel free. I'm just sharing my honest reading experience with that.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I think this is a fantastic back and forth, and like there's no answer, right? There's not going to be a clear answer for anybody, but it's really cool to hear different perspectives or different thoughts or different. Well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe and then people can go in and sort of see what hits for them. And I'll tell you what, it makes me immediately want to go reread it to like focus on that specifically, because I think there's so much in the series, right, that like it almost feels to me like a good way to do a reread is to do a reread with a specific purpose in mind of I'm going to look for how they'd handled this thing. That I'm really curious to do that with this now and kind of see just what different nuances and thoughts pop up. So I think it may be good to move on to the next section here just for the sake of continuing the discussion. But I do just thank you both for going through your thoughts there and sharing all that. I think that's super helpful for me, but also for anybody who's watching this and might be kind of trying to make sense out of all that themselves as well. So
Great.
Next, we met with Typhon. We jumped out to try to, we're in this weird time travel thing again now, right? Just to reorient us to where we're at in the story. So he's gone through, he did his miracles, did his gospel, got imprisoned, escaped. So at this point, he is getting sort of increasingly frustrated with the new sun is coming, but it's too slow and it's not going to get there in time. He's going to die before it gets there. And he's like, we got to figure something out, right? I got to get closer to where this thing is going to land. So he gets into this weird bridge realm thing that another version of Zacula is there, because he's just everywhere. And this is, and again, I don't know if this is the same corridors of time that they've talked about in the series or not, but regardless, it's like a river. And he essentially uses this to time travel to the, because remember, he's in the distant past now. So now he needs to go to the future, and he winds up leapfrogging the events of the 4 books to get to where the new sun is going to be, which is like 50-ish years, I think, after the end of Citadel of the Autarch. And we got another one of these just amazing descriptions to me, where he's walking along the river, which again, those weird stories from the beginning of book 4 come back around, because he remembered one of these stories, and it was like, was it the chicken fighting or something? And he was like, 8 was too much, but 7 was just right. It was like something like that. So he took 7 steps instead of 8 along the river to travel through time. And it reminded me of like a microscope, where you have like a coarse focus and then a fine focus, that he's taking these steps along the river to make the big jumps through time. And then he turns and needs to walk perpendicular to get the fine focus. And it's such a fine line, because when he turns, he takes the one step and it's like black. The next step and it's like fire and destruction. And then the next little step is everything's okay. So he's like, that's where I got to go. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. So that's how he chooses where to go in time. He gets there. He's now at the House Absolute. And again, we're sort of in the future, 50-ish years after the end of book 4. And Valyria is now the Autarch, and he sees his grave, and he's going through. Doesn't he like reanimate another corpse or something? He does something.
Yeah.
And, that's right. Is it the assassin?
Dead assassin. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Which
so
that turns out well.
Yeah, right. And he gets into this room and sees this discussion between Valyria and Baldanders is there, and the girl, what was her name? Helena or something like that. The girl, he healed her arm. That she's there. She's like a captain or something now. And it's like this big discussion that's happening. And essentially what happens is the apocalypse is now happening. The new sun is there. The flood rushes in, and everything's kind of being destroyed. But the thing, I want to say my piece really quick, and then I want to get you guys' thoughts on this section. This is the moment I'm talking about when I say I had this emotional response, because there was a really quick mention at the end of book 4 of that he married Valyria. Really quick. We learned nothing else. She basically wasn't in the series at all, aside from when he met her in book 1 and this really quick mention. And it was like, you got married? What do you mean? And then at the beginning of Urth, he mentioned her again briefly, but it was really quick. And then here we see her, and she was very emotional seeing Severian. And she was like, there's all these statues of him throughout the House Absolute. And there was this moment where she was describing that she created these statues to look like you look now, right? It's speaking to Severian, which to me is like happy and like loving, and like it's a good version of him. And so she made the statues to remember him in that way, because he's going to appear that way now, seeing her again for the first time in who knows how long. And she like chuckles for a second and then just breaks down crying, and like just the grief of losing her husband, right, and seeing him again, and those things. And Severian like refuses to talk about her. And to me, this reminds me a whole lot of this idea of he actually loves this one, so he's not going to share it with us. That's just for him. And he'll tell us all this other stuff about these other things that he's done, these other people he's been with, etc. but not Valyria. And that just really struck me. And it like makes me almost emotional right now just to think, especially from Valyria's perspective, like that moment of her like laughing and then crying. It was like grief and happiness all at the same time. That I don't know. That was very poignant for me, and it just landed perfectly. And then she dies immediately in the flood. So like cool. But anyway, so that's the thing that stood out to me the most from this little part. And now I'll pass it back over to you guys. Whoever wants to share any thoughts you might have here first.
Yeah, I think I love the way you shared that, and I think it's probably the best scene depicting a female character in this whole entire series.
Sure.
And she's actually old in this
Yeah.
section. She's elderly, and yet he sees her as beautiful. And it's like, for once, he's not judging a woman based on her age and her sexual prowess and all of these other things. He's actually seeing the soul of the person. So yeah, I love that how you're touched by that scene. And I think it's beautiful the way you describe it and everything. I already shared that I had a hard time
Sure.
emotionally connecting to it, but at the same time, I appreciated hearing your perspective of it, like when we were reading it too, because I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good point. Because it was hard for me at that point, but no, that is absolutely well said. And I guess the idea is that he walks in backstage to the play. Is what's
Yeah,
exactly.
happening in
Yeah.
that play. And also, I guess I put here that Baldanders explains the black hole in the sun, the white fountain, a burst of motion and energy to fill it. And it's spinning, and motion creates waves of gravitation, which becomes that ringing sound that they hear. That means basically like an apocalypse is coming, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
And that and then the crazy thing about all of this is because we've felt like Baldanders, it's this big giant enemy especially since the end of book 3, since sort of the lictor. And he explains, he's like, oh, I didn't mean you any evil.
Yeah.
And he's like, I threw the claw, the jewel, because you believed in it. Which he thought harmful. He thought it was harmful that Severian believed in it because clearly it wasn't a real thing. And I thought that was wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course we have the Juturna, the giantess, who comes into the scene also in this section. And it's so interesting too. It's like, I kind of like this section a lot because it just twists and turns all of these concepts that we have. Baldanders is bad. Wait, maybe not. And then this giantess gets in, and she seems to be, obviously on the side of destroying Urth, but then she's not. Like she explains that Abaya is actually for humanity. It's like, what is going on? You have all these twists and turns with what you think is the side on humanity versus not on humanity, or for or not for humanity, I should say. And she gets in to claim that, to warn them. She's like, I'm here to warn you and to save you all. Abaya sought good even when in trying to destroy them all. I guess the higher vision was for good. And Severian speaks about how Juturna saved him as a boy, which is all the way back to book 1. And she claims that she doesn't remember that because it hasn't happened yet. Oh my gosh, the time.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's right. Like,
Craziness.
if you think about it, because there's that wild line at the end of Citadel at the Autarch where he's like, actually, there's been a Severian before me. So just putting that out there, you're like, wait, what? And it's like, well, it was actually him, but technically the Severian in Shadow of the Torturer is the second coming of Severian, even though it's the first time he remembers it, because he's going to go back in time and if you like that, like, time travel, like messing with stuff, this is a bunny trail, but I'll just say, The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers. I'm a big Tim Powers fan, and The Anubis Gates is really weird compared to his normal fare, but it's a time travel novel, and there's some of those really fun, like, bending and playing with your mind and tying it in knots things that Powers does as
I
well.
love stuff like that. Memento was a movie I loved growing up. So
Yeah, for sure. So no, I like this section. I was gonna, Joanna said it well there. Of essentially, he walks in backstage off of, and you guys point, and I've never put two and two together. That ringing sound from the new, like the essentially the cataclysm coming, like that's the bells in the play. Is like the recreating of that. And I'm like,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
duh, that's what that would have been.
Nice.
Like, oh, of course. So I just
Oh wow.
put that together. But yeah.
That's cool.
It just makes me laugh. Like I just keep chuckling when I find out these connections. It's like,
Uh-huh.
what? How do I
Yeah.
not see these things before? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why you say you have to reread it, right?
Yeah.
There's just too much to catch. I mean, we caught probably like a quarter of this or something, like
Yeah.
of the connections at least. Like I feel like we've followed the plot really well. I'm sure we've missed some little things, but I think that we got a really good grasp on the overall plot, and
Mhm.
like some of the characters at least. But man, the connections are just, got to reread it for that. Yeah, I feel like this is sort of the most straightforward little honestly, the reason I highlighted this part is because I wanted to talk about Valyria.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of the main
Yeah.
reason why I paused it there. But this is really what launches us into the end of it, right? Where now they're out in the flood, and there's this crazy, really trippy stuff going on with him, swimming underwater and all this crazy stuff that I'm not sure I can make full sense out of.
He finds his own corpse from when he was it from when he was a boy that he finds when he's swimming under there?
Something like that, yeah. And he's like going through Nessus and like seeing the old, like, I don't even know. But the other weird thing is he sees these people on the boat.
Yeah.
And it's like it's one of the boys he grew up with, and then these two other women, and they're just like talking about their life journeys. And I remember, Joanna, when we were reading this, we were both just like, what the heck is, like, what is this? And they turned out to be unbelievably important characters, even though it all happens off the page. But I just thought that like that was interesting. But there's like now, he time travels again, right? It feels like maybe almost out of like desperation, I should say. And now he goes,
it's almost like a reflex, like an uncontrollable reflex.
Exactly. Okay, you guys correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, okay? But this was my takeaway.
Right.
Is he goes really far back in the past. Like much further than he meant to, and he actually gets stranded a little bit because he's back too far, where the new sun, the White Fountain, is too far away, and he can't access those time travel powers anymore. So he's so far back, and he's kind of in this weird situation with these primitive people, but he has knowledge of more modern, building methods and stuff, right? So he's helping them and doing all this stuff, and they start to like worship him. And we're almost getting a second version, rather than him doing the miracles as the conciliator. This is him now doing the miracles as what will become Apu Punch-Out. And he's starting to become this figure. And they eventually rebel and kill him. And ends up just having to sort of wait in his own tomb for the new sun to get close enough that he can escape this time. And when he does eventually escape this, he goes to, again, he shoots way far into the future, where now the new sun's already come, the world's been rebuilt, and they see what is sort of a version of like monuments to him and the people that were on the boat that are like the gods who helped create this new world, and they're being worshipped. They call Severian the Sleeper, and he like blesses these people, and which I thought was actually a really great way to end this, when he was like, hey, just do your best to be nice. That was like his blessing, his message. But like one of the weird things that I don't know if there's clarity on is when he's in the tomb and he's waiting for time, there's like this, even in the appendix of the book, Gene Wolfe is saying there's something about him extending the night, and that there's something happened that maybe is some sort of eclipse or something that helps him do that. And I have no idea what that means. I don't even remember him extending the night so much as him just sort of waiting. But that part is still very confusing to me. But otherwise, we go back in time, do all the Apu Punch-Out stuff. So now all that makes sense of where Apu Punch-Out comes from. That's why he disappeared at the end of book 2, because Severian got too close and the timelines were like overlapping, and that can't happen. And so like that stuff all kind of makes more sense now. And then we get into the future. We see Severian is revered as this god. He blesses these people, and we essentially end the story there. So, one, am I alone or just missing something and being confused about the weird night thing? And two, thoughts on sort of like the ultimate ending of the story.
Yeah,
You go first. You go first, Sam.
Okay, yeah, Wolf's note there. Maybe other people get. I still find it to be cryptic. I'm not fully sure what that is. I will say, when I reread Book of the New Sun the second time, I was still like, at the end of Claw of the Conciliator, I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, even on a reread. And then my third time through, I was like, okay, I really, really want to get a grasp on that. And having read Urth of the New Sun, I think, and like that's the one part where Wolf is like, technically all the information is in the main four, and you don't need Urth of the New Sun. And I'm like, really, Gene? Really? I would have been able to figure out Apu Punchow from what's in those 4 books. And I think
that was the biggest thing for me, Sam. That was the biggest reason that I was like, this is necessary for me, or the most clarifying feature of this book for me was the Apu Punchow part. Yeah.
And so then going back and rereading that ending of Claw of the Conciliator, that scene with Apu Punchow, not that it's like, oh, it's simple and straightforward. It makes a lot more sense though, when you're like, oh, right, okay. And I did not realize this, but Dave Butler, the fantasy author DJ Butler, he has a YouTube channel called High Low Brow. He went through Lord of the Rings. He's going through Book of the New Sun now, and he talked about this because he's like very like much a nerd when it comes to languages and understanding a lot of ins and outs of that. So, helpful with something like Book of the New Sun, right? Yeah. And one thing he pointed out is he said the idea of a necromancer, in pop culture, we think of like, oh, you make zombies. And he said in like folklore, a necromancer is actually somebody who, let me see here, summons spirits of the dead to get information from them. And in Book of the New Sun, Severian refers to Apu Punchow as, I think the term was a vivimancer, which is the opposite of that, a dead person who summons the living to get information from them. And so essentially it's like, yes, so Severian as Apu Punchow, dead, like summons himself and the other people who are part of this like seance at the end of Claw the Conciliator, and like creates that whole scene. So, and I think my brain's in a knot by now.
Yeah,
me too.
Wow.
Yeah, but that went from being like super confusing, which I'm not saying it isn't now, but to being one of my favorite sequences in the series now.
Yeah,
having that context of Urth. And there's
one
other thing about like Severian being the new sun at the end of the book, but I've talked enough for now, so I'll put a pin in that and we'll come back to it later.
I'll try my best. This is the most in some ways, like I appreciated this part of the book. I'm like, thank you for bringing back Apu Punchow, because that was going to forever remain a confusing point of the whole Book of the New Sun series. So I got excited. I got so excited when he recognized the stone roof, and it was like, oh, because of the stone village, because that we were in book 2. And that's so interesting about the vivisector. That sounds familiar, and I don't know why, but I don't know if that is that term used in the series.
I think Severian called him a vivimancer in
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah,
the book.
Yeah,
because it sounded familiar. Let's see. I wrote down a lot of things here, so I won't go through all of them, at least the first part here, but there were just so many interesting things that went back to the conversation that he had with Apellarine about anima versus being a materialist. Do you recall that? And he has this conversation with Thalamus because she's trying to explain to him like if he's dead or not, because it's so paradoxical the way that she describes things. And then he talking about the dangers of meeting your own doubles. There was a conversation about that too. What? That's wild. And let's see if I can get this right. There's some kind of powerful quote. Let me see if I could find it. I did try to put, I love this quote. I think this is the one I loved. Something like, perhaps death is only horrible to us because it's a dividing of the terror of life from the wonder of it. We see only the terror, which is left behind. I love that line. That is so neat.
Great.
Such a great line.
He has so many great. What a
Oh,
writer, man! I mean,
yeah.
he has so many great lines.
There are so many. I have like a whole couple of pages of quotes because
It's awesome.
I just love his writing. Like, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
But there is, let's see, what I put here, in addition to that powerful quote, that Abu Pancha will be revived once the White Fountain star gets close enough to be first seen on Earth when we're in this timeline. And he has to, I guess the idea is he has to be gone before he's revived. Is that correct? Does that pan out? Because I know he tries to leave before, I don't know. There was some weird section where he almost met his double, or he saw his double from afar. I remember that vaguely.
Oh,
Do you remember that, Jake?
it sounds familiar. I'm struggling with the exact.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little fuzzy for me now too.
Yeah.
So it says, so he anyway, I wrote that down, that Abu Pancha will be revived because he's there next to the corpse. Once the star gets close enough. So he's waiting for the star to get close enough. And maybe that has to do with the extended night. And then he can help his people. Severian asked about, and I'm guessing this is to Valamis, or what's her name? Can't remember the name of the person. Familis, I think that's right. Severian asks about the older Severian body he saw on Zadkiel's ship. And Familis says, the man whom you saw dead, your mother bore. So, in other words, that he saw the body that his mother bore. I know that sounds very cryptic. That's what he wrote. That's what she
Yeah.
said. So what Zadkiel did, let's see if I can make sense of this. Remembrance taking from your dead mind to build your own mind, and you are new. Severian was made an Eilodon, is what I wrote there. Does that pan out on Zadkiel's ship?
Yeah, those are the weird ghost-like things, right? Like Malrubius was that at the end of book 4.
Yeah.
face.
Wasn't that something else though? Wasn't that I'm forgetting what the name of it is called. I think there might be another name for that, but I could be wrong. It might be an
Not sure.
Eilodon. It might be. There were a couple of terms in this series
Oh,
that I'm
man.
like, okay. But basically that's what I wrote. So I could be wrong. This is
Sure.
past me writing, and I'm trying to make sense of it even now what I wrote. But I wrote that Severian was made an Eilodon on Zadkiel's ship. His corpse is on that ship, broadcasting his memories into being. So maybe you're right. Is what I put. I think. I think.
Okay. That sounds about right.
So his corpse is on Zadkiel's ship, and then
Right.
he's being projected or broadcasted from that corpse.
Okay.
So he's kind of dead, but
Yeah.
not. Yeah, I guess. So when we saw his body leave, like see himself outside of himself,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, yeah.
that was part of that departure earlier in
Yeah.
the book.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I wrote there. Let's see. I wrote, made me a walking, speaking picture of myself. The fall killed me. So that was when he fell.
Mhm.
That kill, I think. Just as my people killed me here, looking at Abu Panchao, because the people killed him
Yeah.
there. They strangled Abu Panchao. And so the Abu Panchao corpse, I put twin cell with Severian on Zadkiel's. There's a corpse there, the corpse there. So 2 corpses of Severian, and then he's the Eilodon, I suppose. The twin corpses feed the Eilodon projection, is how I understood this.
Okay.
And anybody can correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. Severian tries to make sense out of why he has been unable to travel the corridors of time currently ever, even as the White Fountain shines. And he comes to the conclusions that one, fear allowed him access to Typhon's when Typhon's men attacked. And that was when he was there when he was there on that area where Typhon and his army were after him earlier in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Abu Panchao might rise and endanger himself any moment in this chapter. Just forget about that. I don't know what I'm saying there. And then the other part was distance and light from the White Fountain affect access.
Right.
Currently far and faint. So he's able to get stones to, I can't read my writing there. Anyway, we'll just go on from there. But basically that's what I understood from that section. There's more I wrote that I just won't go through because it's confusing. But no, I actually what I wrote on from there just had to do with what you were saying about how he goes back to, I guess, Earth in its rebirth stage. What is the
Yeah.
new word for it?
Ushas, I think.
Rishas, yeah. And he meets the mythic people, I guess, or learns about the mythic gods that he had already met in person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, there's so much. All the death and projection. I mean, how many times does Severian die? Like 20 times in the series. Like it's a lot. So
There's got to be a number out there on a Reddit thread somewhere.
Yeah.
It's one of those like at least twice and maybe hundreds.
Right.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So he
No, 3
recalls that.
times because the plant duel too.
Yeah, the plant duel definitely gets him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically there's a rebirth. There's
Oh, sorry. Yes. Chapter 2 when he drowns in the river.
Yeah, the drowning.
Or does he?
Yeah. I know there's in my memory. I'm like, I know there's more. I just gotta actually sit down and think it all through. Anyway, Sam, do you have any thoughts on the ending here?
Yeah. So the one other thing, and this becomes clear as to like, okay, so there's some of the picaresque incidents that like Severian has in the main four where it's like, why is this here? You know, and Master Ash and the Green Man are one of those that took me a minute before it's like, okay, so like Master Ash is the future if Severian does not succeed, if no new sun comes. And then you've got the Green Man, which is like, this is what humanity is going to change, is going to evolve into. If the new sun comes, if this Earth is wiped out and then new life starts again, they're going to evolve into this human plant hybrid, whereby, and the Green Man talks about this, they gain most of their strength, their life, they feed through photosynthesis like a plant. And so, and this is like one of my favorite things that it took me the 3 readings before I was like, oh, duh. And once again, this is not because everybody needs to read it 3 times to get these things. It's because I'm a dummy and it takes me multiple times of reading things to pick up on this.
I didn't get what you're about to say, but go ahead.
But like Severian becomes a new person and becomes like reborn throughout the series as he engages in this this cannibalistic act, consuming Thekla, consuming the Autarchs, being brought into that fellowship, if you will. Which, if you want to look at it this way, it's Wolf doing sort of a twist and maybe ultra literal take on the Catholic doctrine of the Eucharist, you know, consuming the body and blood of Christ, and that makes you a new person. And that is what happens to the entirety of humanity that is reborn on Earth after the new sun comes and the flood and all of humanity dies and then is reborn, is they get new life through photosynthesis by eating off of Severian, who is the new sun. So they are constantly consuming Severian, the new sun, as these like plant creatures. Which once again is like, of course they do that, like duh. Yeah. But like it's one of those like nutty things where as I'm saying this out loud, I'm like, this is such crazy nonsense. Like how can you describe this to somebody who hasn't like read the books? Be like, and by the end everybody turns into a plant creature and eats the main character because he's a star now. Yeah.
Do they describe plant creatures? Did I miss that? Are they plant creatures at the end?
So that's what the Green Man is.
Yeah, I think that's further. I think that's even further in the future.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
But not exactly where we end
correct.
Just what we can infer about the future.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. That's
I think it's just the fact that the Green Man exists that is the clue that is the direction they're headed. Which, by the way, we didn't mention him, but he kind of came back around to help guide Severian with his time travel stuff, like he promised back in was it book 2, right? So that was pretty cool to see that.
I think he first appeared in book 2, and then he appeared again in Citadel of the Autarch, right?
Yes, I think that's right. He freed him or something.
Yeah. But he claims he didn't. He claims he didn't actually help him, or that he came back to help him and that he was already taken care of. And
sounds familiar.
Yeah. It was after he had consumed the Autarch, I think, or become the Autarch.
It sounds familiar.
He was escaping with Agia. Yeah.
And this is where I put in a plug, and where I maybe need to turn in my Wolf fan card. So I have read Book of the Long Sun, the next sub-series in the Solar Cycle. I've yet to read Book of the Short Sun, so that's coming up on the TBR. I have been told, though, that more of this stuff about plant-human hybrids, what does the future look like post-New Sun, that some of that gets explored, maybe, in Book of the Short Sun.
Interesting.
So that's me repeating
We'll
on
see.
what I've been told from the folks who have read that, but just to put a plug for that.
I just love it. I love the Green Man stuff. Thank you
cool.
for explaining all that because, well, I already loved the Green Man in book 2 just because I like weird stuff in my books. And I'm like, you don't get weirder than a little green man forecasting your future or whatever.
Yeah.
In the future, who just talks to you that you're
Right.
helping out. But then the
Yeah.
fact that there's actually like a logical line to the Green Man makes it somehow even cooler. Like just on top of everything. Like I don't know. I love how he did that. I love how Wolf presented these things in the way that he structured the narrative is brilliant in my opinion because it seems random at first. The way he could insert things that seem random and then later on, oh, that all connects. That all makes sense. Like that's
Yeah.
just incredible how he did that.
Right. It's kind of like this comment from Eric about the moon being green also, that like it's
Yes.
the
Yeah.
same thing. It sounds
Oh,
like
yeah.
a weird random detail, but it's because they tried to terraform the moon. Right?
Yeah.
So like, there's plant life there all. So like it all, just like you're saying, it feels like weird random details, but it all has a reason and logically fits together. It's the coolest thing, man.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
There are some things that maybe just because I've only read the series once and I've
Oh,
done
for
the best
sure.
I could. I did the best I could. Jake and I think you and I did the best we
I
could.
think we did
And
great.
I think we did great
Yeah.
too. As our first time reading, we tried really, really hard. And at the same time, I have to say, like, even after watching Moyd's video, there were some things that I can't put my finger on it where he said this because of this. And I'm like, how did you make that leap? Like, and I even went back and reread a part he was talking about, like, how?
Yeah.
But I think that's absolutely incredible that there is so much there for rereaders to latch on to or connect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that note, I mean, we've been talking for almost 2 hours. I feel like we barely scratched the surface in a weird way, but we've also gotten through more than I thought, which is awesome. And so maybe to avoid viewer fatigue for too much longer here, do we want to maybe wrap up with like any final thoughts or anything that we haven't discussed that you guys really want to get off your chest, or just anything like that to kind of round us out here?
I don't really have anything more I think I would say. I think this discussion was fabulous though. Like I feel like I just appreciated all the reflections and connecting the dots again, because even though we are first time readers, even just going through it again in a discussion format kind of helps me to connect things a little bit more deeply, in my
100%.
opinion.
Me
So
too.
this was a very rewarding discussion. I did, yeah, it helped me. I think it deepened what I feel about the series for sure. So I'll just say that.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I'd say, once again, just thanks to Jake for hosting this, obviously, and thanks to both of you guys for not only the discussion but also letting me like jump in and talk about it, because I know you two were reading it together, and I love getting to hear about the experience of people who read through this series. That's always a lot of fun. And like I said, it's my favorite installment in the series, even though I know it clearly doesn't work for everyone. But that's all right. And I guess the last thing that I'll do, because I know poor Jake, I've been hounding him about this, but also put a plug out for you as well, Joanna, that if you're interested, you should really check out the Book of the Long Sun at some point as well. So this is the second part of the Solar Cycle, but it's not exactly a sequel. So it's not about Severian. It's about a whole other host of cast of characters, and it's told from third person, from a bunch of different points of views, all across the societal spectrum, or is it? And I guess what I'll say to tie it to Book of the New Sun, if you want to know, if people are like, no spoilers. I want to know zero zilch about the books. I'll say this is set in the same world, but has more to do with when we talk about the reign of Typhon and rulers before him and the galactic empire that Earth once had, and now that's kind of shriveled up and died. The Book of the Long Sun has more to do with that. So there's a lot of fun, weird sci-fi things that Wolf plays in. It is much more consciously and obviously science fiction than even Book of the New Sun is. And it has a very different tone. The protagonist, Patera Silk, is way more likable than Severian. He is actually like a real, like, noble, outstanding guy. Yeah, I don't know. Book of the Long Sun. I know there's a couple booktubers who have read it, but it's certainly not as covered as New Sun. So, yeah. So just to put a plug in that it is certainly worth the read. And hopefully you guys check it out sometime.
So that is first person narration from a different character. Is that what I hear you saying?
No, it's
Third
third
person, right?
person
Third
from
person.
multiple points of view.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Very different. I mean, I absolutely will. It's penciled in for as soon as I can get to it, which is unfortunately probably next year because I have way too many buddy reads that I lined up and cornered myself once again. But that's okay. But I definitely want to do it. It sounds awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah. So thank you both so much for doing this. I've had an absolute blast reading the series and talking about it. I mean, you two are the ones that by far I've talked about it the most with. Joanna, you the most, obviously, because we literally every day reading these books, like multiple messages back and forth, and it was great. And then Sam, I talked to you a bunch about it as well. It's just been awesome. And this series has become very special to me. It's definitely one of my favorite reading experience. It's not my favorite like story ever necessarily, but the experience of reading it is one of my favorite experiences that I've had. And I just like the story itself a good amount as well. So anyway, for anyone who's still watching this video, I feel like this video is probably going to get like 50 views because no one has read this far in the series. But for those who have read it, I hope this is useful. I think this is an awesome discussion, and we got through into some really, really great stuff. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for watching. And leave us a comment down below what you thought of the book. If you have any questions, you want to clarify anything we talked about, share your perspective, any of that kind of stuff. And if you somehow are not subscribed to either Sam or Joanna, both of them will be linked in here, obviously. So go subscribe there. And I guess we'll see what's next in our Gene Wolfe journeys whenever those pick back up again or what have you. So that's all I got.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, we will see you next time.